The first time I'd heard about Bitcoin was in high school. A friend sitting next to me had bought like $5 of it, and it was going up and going down to 550 to 450, and we're like, oh my God, this thing is so crazy, it's so volatile. But I didn't really have any capital to deploy, nor did I know anything about it, so I just put it to the side, whatever.
I just thought it was too complex, and I was like, this sounds way too risky and hard. This isn't for me. So I just left it and didn't look at it again for a few years.
Bitcoin is hope. I think we all know the problems that Gen Z is facing: rising costs of rent, rising groceries, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better.
It is simple. It's just new to you. So don't let any of this stop you. If anything, make it get you off zero and just learn on the go. What comes with that is great responsibility. One of the greatest strengths, it's the only thing in the world you can truly own and no one can confiscate from you. What I've come to realize is that there's people in the space that have been in Bitcoin 2017, 2018 that still have all their Bitcoin on an exchange. And to me, that is absolutely mind-blowing.
Everyone in Gen Z who starts to approach me asking about this stuff is they say, what are your thoughts on crypto? Bitcoin and crypto are two different worlds.
Welcome back to the show. Today we're joined by Rohan Hirani, who is a Gen Z Bitcoin advocate who's building in the Bitcoin space and is bringing a really fresh perspective on how our generation can own financial sovereignty, but also much, much more in detail. Rohan, great to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you, Finn. Great to be here. Doing wonderful.
Good, man. So before we dive in, for the listeners, we're going to be talking about why self-custody matters, what Rohan's thoughts are on self-custody, how Gen Z can start thinking differently about money and Bitcoin, and then some concrete steps that you can take if you are curious but still haven't pulled the trigger, or if you're still having questions. Hopefully this conversation will iron some things out for you. And then we're also going to talk about Rohan's journey in Bitcoin and what he's building in the space, which is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to hear a bit more. To kick us off, can you walk us through your path into Bitcoin? What kind of sparked your interest at first, and what kind of led you, I guess, from curious to then being convicted as you are now?
Yeah, great question. So I guess the first time I'd heard about Bitcoin was in high school. A friend sitting next to me had bought like $5 of it, and it was going up and going down to 550 to 450. And we're like, oh my God, this thing is so crazy. It's so volatile. But I didn't really have any capital to deploy, nor did I know anything about it. So I just put it to the side, whatever. 21 started to come around when it started to get big again. And I, again, still didn't really know what it was. And I helped found Illini Blockchain, which was like our university's general blockchain org group. So that's why I got more into Solana and NFTs and all the hype. And I still didn't really know what any of it was. It was just cool, speculative gambling at the time, quite frankly. Then the bear market hit, and I'm like, you know what? Like, what is all this stuff? I really sat down, and once I started to study the history of money, that's like when everything clicked for me. And that's when I became like very deep into Bitcoin. So this was like middle of 2022, I would say. And then from there, I right after graduating school, I worked at Bain & Company as a strategy consultant for about 2 years. And it was like 80, 90-hour weeks. But every hour outside of work that I had free, I was just deep studying Bitcoin and trying to stay involved in the space as much as I could. I would go to a few conferences, but I knew, and I joined consulting because I didn't know what I wanted to do or what space I wanted to be in, but that kind of solidified it for me. And so about 3-4 months ago, I actually left Bain to build Bitcoin Quant full-time. Saw a gap in the Bitcoin treasury space about data analytics for investors, and so started to build there, and it's been an interesting 4 months ever since that.
It's crazy how quick things can move when you find a passion and follow it. And I'm really looking forward to talking a bit more about that in detail later on in the episode for sure. Moving on the same topic, was there a moment or a piece of content that really flipped the switch for you where you kind of had your this changes everything moment?
I think it was the Bitcoin Standard, the book. Once I started to, I didn't know the history of money. I feel like I was never really taught it in school. But once I started to go back in time, understand rhinestones, understand seashells, different forms of money that have been used over time, to the gold standard, then to the fiat era, and then in what we have now, it started to make sense that there has to be some sort of sound money standard for a society to thrive. And I saw the problems around me. They were very evident. And then the other thing that made it all click was this website called WTF happened in 1971. It's a great starting point for anyone who's interested in going down the journey of Bitcoin, but it basically emphasizes that in 1971, that's when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard, and we became a society that can print money as much as we want, whenever we want. We deviated a little bit from the laws of physics and nature, and that changed a lot of things. A lot of problems in society came from that. And so that kind of got me deep down this rabbit hole.
It's a great website. I'll make sure to put that in the description when the video is published. And staying on this topic, I haven't done it for a few episodes, but early on I really did. If we can really bring it back to basics, can you just explain what those understandings of what money is and how Bitcoin is the solution for that? Can you give us a really brief overview of what that is for listeners that might be hearing this kind of thing for the first time?
Yeah. So a concept I hadn't heard of until the Bitcoin standard was something called the stock to flow ratio. And this might sound technical, but bear with me. It's actually pretty simple. It's basically saying in a society where there is a high stock to flow ratio, the stock is how much supply there is of the currency. And then the flow is how easy is it for new currency to come into that supply, right? And so if you have a strong base of a fixed scarce supply of that currency, and it's not easy for new stuff to get printed without a lot of energy, then it is a stronger currency, right? And if you look throughout the history of time at all the different monies that have been used, a lot of monies that started off very good is because they had a high stock to flow ratio. And over time, something or another happened in different societies where that ratio started to lower. And that's when things started to break. I can give like a few examples of that. It's been a while since I've read up on these concepts, but one of them is the rhinestone in this island in Micronesia called the Yap Island. They used to use these big stones for money. And the reason that these were valuable is because they were very hard to procure and hard to get. What had to happen was the strongest men on the island had to go via like a canoe to the nearby island, lose members of their crew along the way. They had to procure these very heavy rocks, chop them off the island, and bring them back. And since it was very hard to do, the people on the island saw that there's a lot of value to this, right? One day, there was this English-Irish sailor named David O'Keefe, I believe, who ended up on the island. And he saw this system and he said, I have an interesting idea. So he grabs his boys, his ships. He had these big ships that he procured from China. They went over to this nearby island with TNT, started to blow it up. It was very easy for them to get these rhinestones. And they would put it on their ships and come back to this island and they'd say, ta-da, we're rich. You know, they can get all the coconuts they want because now they've disrupted the stock to flow ratio. What used to be a very stable supply and very hard to add new rhinestones to the society, he basically changed that because now it's very easy for him to get these. And of course, what happens? The currency collapses and a lot of the island has a lot of issues. Same thing happened with like seashells in Africa and sea cowries. They used to use these as currency because they were hard to find on the shore. They were rare, scarce, until they got imported in mass quantities from Europe, or big sailors went out to the sea with these big nets and were able to procure a lot at once. That collapses the currency, right? So over time, this has been a trend. And so I think that's why gold was such a good form of currency for such a long period of time, because it has a high stock to flow ratio. There is a stable amount of supply, and it's very hard to get more. You have to go underground and mine it. Now, it's not fixed supply, and there's ways to manipulate that a little bit, but overall, it stood the test of time for the last 5,000 years. The problem with gold was that it became very centralized, and basically banks, people started, since gold is very heavy and hard to carry around, it's not very portable, especially as globalization started to happen more, people started to store their gold in banks, and then banks would issue out a note that says, you own this much gold, right? And eventually they started to issue out more paper notes than they had in gold reserves. But this is getting on a tangent. The point of this was the stock to flow ratio was a very interesting metric to me. And when you look at Bitcoin, it is the most pure version of that in the history of mankind, basically. It is a truly fixed, scarce supply that no one, no matter how rich they are, whether they can go to space, no matter who you are, you cannot create more than 21 million Bitcoin, and that'll forever be the case. And that is one of the core principles of Bitcoin that really struck me as like, I think I'm starting to get it.
Awesome. I'm going to go off script here and bring it back to this, but just on something you just mentioned there around gold and centralization stuff. You're big into the Bitcoin treasury space. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the centralization. Obviously, it's a decentralized network, but of the Bitcoin supply becoming more and more centralized with companies accruing such big amounts. We'll obviously then talk around why self-custody is important with this, but what are your thoughts on these companies just accumulating so much Bitcoin? What's your view on all of this?
Yeah, it depends on what angle you look at it from. Like, is it good for Bitcoin? I don't know. Is it good for that company? Yeah, probably. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin is it's open source software and anyone can use it how they like, as long as they're playing within the rules of the protocol, right? And so if a company decides it's very strategically advantageous to us to acquire a lot of Bitcoin, they have the privilege to do so, right? As long as they put up the money for it. And so quite frankly, the fact of the matter is the ones who figure that out earlier than later are the ones that are going to get more of it. And so they're taking on that quote unquote risk of this weird, volatile, unknown magic internet money, but they're going to get rewarded for that. It's something that Hal Finney also would talk about in the early forums of just like there is going to be these Bitcoin banks. Like, in my opinion, the state of hyper Bitcoinization of when it really gets adopted in mass, it's almost impossible for it to bypass Wall Street, for it to bypass large corporations. They're going to see the value too that all the individuals have seen, that it's a great store of value and has a lot of fundamentally advantageous monetary properties to it. And so those companies can do what they want, I think, with it. So yeah, that's kind of my long-winded answer.
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's a great answer. And my view on it is Bitcoin's for everyone. So if that is the case, you can't be stopping it from Wall Street. You can't be stopping it from companies or banks. And that is part of the process. And I think what's most exciting and why I'm so urgent at getting the message out there and putting content out is there's still an opportunity for everyone, but for Gen Z to front run a lot of this stuff because it's still not played out yet. I have conversations with Gen Z all the time around money printing and trying to help them understand what is money and what the problem with money as it is today is fiat. They don't even know money printing's a thing. And then they don't realize that this is what's causing inflation and this is what's causing everything to be more expensive and their lives to become harder. What do you think the reason for that is? And what's your experience been to helping people understand what's going on?
Yeah, great question. I think in my experience, people just resort to what they see on their traditional media, right? If the news tells you that inflation is 2%, then you think, okay, my money is devaluing at 2%. They don't look at the M2 money supply or the rate of monetary debasement. Like we said in the stock to flow ratio, or here's an example. Let's make one up, right? Let's say there is 20 of our friends and there is 10 iPhones, basically, right? There's not an iPhone for everyone. And so because of that, the value of the iPhone that you'll pay for it is very expensive. If all of a sudden some outside third party comes and gifts everyone, here's 20 more iPhones to add to the pile. Now it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to pay as much for your iPhone because I can just go get it from this other person, right? As the supply increases, the value decreases. So what's happening, to tie it back, is that they're printing money at a rate of 6 to 12% a year based on when you look at it, which means the denominator of that money is increasing at 6 to 12% a year, not 2% like we're told on the traditional media, right? I think another thing is, so that's one half. There's an education gap of like people not knowing this, right? The second thing I found with Gen Z is that, okay, a lot of people know this and it makes them even more scared. And so they want to find what are the levered bets that I can take to go up even faster than Bitcoin, right? And so what's the first route? Other crypto, because those seem to be, they have an even higher volatility. So those can go up even faster. I've already missed the boat on Bitcoin, right? Or Polymarket or sports betting. Like there's a reason that all of these have trended in this direction, because people feel desperate. A lot of people feel the problems that are coming with money printing and they want to find a fast horse out. But it doesn't always work that easy.
Yeah, and that exact word, the fastest horse, is what actually led me to look at Bitcoin properly. And yes, like you're talking about, these cryptos or this betting could be a faster horse for a fraction of the time, but you need to zoom out for a longer time horizon, and then Bitcoin quite clearly becomes the fastest horse. And I've never been a person that likes taking risk, and a lot of people think Bitcoin is risky, but I I personally believe Bitcoin is less risky than fiat, but obviously way, way less risky than crypto and the rest of the gambling scene that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Like, I think when people associate like volatility and risk like they're the same thing. You know, if something is risky, therefore it's volatile. So that's why everyone says Bitcoin is risky. When in reality, if you look at a lot of the risks that a traditional investment would face, whether that's real estate or an equity, Bitcoin doesn't face any of those traditional risks. There's no counterparty risks. You don't have to depend on what a marketing department will do or whether a company's vision is good or whether you have to trust this person or another. You're just trusting this fixed set of rules that are embedded in code that can't be changed unless there's consensus. And it kind of just does its thing. It's always done its thing. What's risky is the thing you're measuring it in, which is like fiat money, right? So that'll fluctuate, go up and down, and people's sentiment will change the price at a given time for Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, I don't think Bitcoin is as risky as people think it is just because it's volatile.
Absolutely. And not financial advice, but I think we are in a moment at the moment in the best risk adjusted time ever to be buying Bitcoin and accumulating Bitcoin. So what an amazing opportunity for people right now to be coming around to Bitcoin and take advantage of that. I'm going to put you on the spot here. So if you had 30 seconds to explain to a Gen Z, a 25-year-old, why Bitcoin is more than just looking at a price chart, what would you say?
Why is Bitcoin more than just a price chart? I think Bitcoin is hope. I think we all know the problems that Gen Z is facing, rising costs of rent, rising groceries, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better. You want something that you know can protect you as your store of value, the hard money that you work for, and your kids in the future. Bitcoin is an answer to that. It's hard to explain why in 20 seconds, but I think Jack Mallers has a good quote that he says, I will not work for what another man can print. And if they can print dollars, then they can devalue your dollars. No one can print more Bitcoin. And so they can't devalue the thing that you own, which is Bitcoin. I guess that's a summary, which would hopefully lead to follow-up questions, which is where more time can go spending getting an answer.
Yeah, that's the goal. Because my next question is going to be for someone that is starting to ask good questions, and start to click in their brain that Bitcoin might be a solution for some of their problems. What's the first thing you'd push them towards looking at to keep further educating themselves and going down the rabbit hole?
It's a very interesting question. I think there's a lot of great resources out there, of course, but I think one of the most interesting things about Bitcoin is it's not just like it's not one discipline. To understand Bitcoin, you have to have a fundamental understanding of how the economy works, engineering, energy, politics, game theory, math. Like it just goes on, right? Bitcoin is like a lens to see the world for all of these different disciplines rather than just like one siloed thing that you just go and learn about because it connects everything together. And that's why it takes so long to learn. And that's why it takes a lot of effort to really grasp this thing because there's no one lens that you can come at it from. At least for me, I had to humble myself a lot and just accept the fact that it's easy to just dismiss this as some magic internet money that's just like a gamble, get rich quick for criminals and it's a Ponzi scheme. But if I just like, hold on, like there's a lot of smart people in the world that do believe in this thing. Why is that the case? Then I started to actually look into it. I think the problem is when you go on Google and you search up like what is Bitcoin, right? The first result that pops up is Investopedia. And immediately it starts talking about the hash rate and mining and this block and Satoshi and all this stuff that really means nothing until you understand like what is the problem that needs to be solved and why is this the solution? Because these articles just orient to like here's the features of it and here's the properties, but like most people don't even understand the problems that this thing would solve, right? And I think that's why it was good that you asked that question. But yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's why my first go-to is What's the Problem by Joe Bryan, who's actually on the show next month. I think it's the same with anything, right? Even if with sales, you can't sell someone something if they don't know they've got a problem in the first place. So educating people around the problem first, because everyone can feel inflation, everyone can feel rising costs and everything getting harder, but they still don't know the problem or the cause of it. So once they can understand that, that's where they can start going down the rabbit holes and exploring further because they actually know that they need a solution to this problem, which, as we know, Bitcoin provides. You said just then that you had to kind of overcome a lot of blocks or push past them in your journey. What is one belief that you hold now that people you speak to or people in our generation would probably disagree with?
That's a good one. I think one is what I was saying earlier about like volatility is not the same thing as risk. Like nowadays, when I see Bitcoin, what is it at now? 90K, 85K or something, it's dropping, right? It doesn't really bother me that much because I'm just like at peace. Whereas when I was early on in my journey, if I saw it drop a little bit, I would be like, oh my God, like, well, like, what is this thing? Like the biggest thing is to know what you hold. I think that's the most important thing. That's why Warren Buffett says, find 10 things in your life throughout your lifetime. 10 investments is all you really need, but make sure you understand, in his case, the balance sheets and every single little thing about those. I think it's the same thing here because if you buy something and you haven't studied it, you're just going to sell the second you start to have doubts, right? And so that's why people say like, oh, it's not a good time to buy Bitcoin. I'll say, well, now's a good time to study it because until you've studied it, it's gonna go up a little bit. You'll sell it if it's doing well, and then it'll go up a ton more, and you'll miss out. Or you'll sell it if it goes down, and you'll basically just sell in times where you would regret in the future. So it's important to know what you hold.
Absolutely. And I think that the education space, there's so many great voices, but we need more and more. We need people like you to keep putting the message out and people to join us because it's still such an unknown thing for people to get the education. My views on this have changed over time because I used to be of the opinion that people really need to understand it before buying, but my beliefs have shifted slightly now that people should buy and learn on the go. And yes, some people are not going to either put in the work or something's going to happen to the price. They'll panic and sell while they're learning. But being in and having Bitcoin is better than not having Bitcoin, even if they end up selling whatever. But if they just get in, get some Bitcoin, even if it's just $100 to start with, so they can start understanding kind of the mechanics, but still really pushing. You've got some Bitcoin now, great, but you need to now do the work to learn what this thing is and why this thing's gonna change your life.
Yeah, you bring up a phenomenal point that like you need an incentive, right, to follow it and learn it and understand it. And what better incentive is there for something like this than actually just buying it? If that's your money going up and down, you're more likely to actually take the time to think about it and be like, whoa, what do I own? Versus it just being some external outside thing in your life. Everyone's so busy, everyone has their own lives. To sit there and like try and learn Bitcoin takes time. And so you're right, just getting off zero is the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And what comes with that is great responsibility. And that's a topic that I want to talk about and move into now is the traditional world as it has been. We can outsource a lot of stuff. We can use banks to hold our fiat. Bitcoin, obviously, you can have on an exchange, which I'm not an advocate for at all. But one of the greatest strengths, in my opinion, is it's the only thing in the world you can truly own and no one can confiscate from you. And for those that don't understand what I'm getting at here, you can self-custody your Bitcoin, which means you own it and it's not in a bank or it's not on an exchange where an exchange could just shut. There's countless stories of this where they just blow up and then your Bitcoin is gone and you're chasing lawsuits and all of this stuff. But that doesn't happen if you own it in self-custody. So what are your thoughts on self-custody? And how do you see that being a value proposition of Bitcoin?
100% agree with everything you said. I mean, one of the whole like ethos around Bitcoin is this idea of self-sovereignty and true freedom. I think that's why Bitcoin started off very popular with libertarians. And I think my take on it is the most important thing is getting off zero. Someone who's new to Bitcoin, and you'll find out eventually of why self-custody matters as you're deep in your journey. But in my experience, when I try and tell like new people of where to start, and I tell them like, oh, like you should get a wallet or something like that, it's almost too intimidating. And it makes them feel like the whole thing is too technical. And it's like, this is not for me. Like they don't understand the value prop of what that means to truly secure your own kind of Bitcoin, right? I think people understand that as they've been in the space longer. So I kind of default my answer to what your previous answer was, is that the most important thing when determining how to custody your Bitcoin, whether it's through an exchange, through your Robinhood app, Coinbase, or like a hot wallet or cold wallet or whatever, is the most important thing is get off zero. And then over time, you'll learn the issues that have happened in the past when you outsource to an exchange like Mt. Gox, and you'll start to realize that self-custodying is the most important thing you can do with your Bitcoin to truly have peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that, because when my first year out of school, when I first was introduced to Bitcoin properly, just the guy that was trying to explain it said you could buy on Coinbase or Binance. And he was like, Binance is a bit more complex, but the fees are less. And just that, that shut me down from even looking into Bitcoin anymore. That freaked me out. I was like, nope, that's not for me.
What aspect
So
there shut you down?
I just thought it was too complex, and I was like, this sounds way too risky and hard. This isn't for me. So I just left it and didn't look at it again for a few years. I wish I did, but everyone says you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. And at the time, I didn't need Bitcoin in my life. It made no sense to me at the time for where I was at. However, fast forward to when I really got introduced to Bitcoin, and this has been a big realization for me the last year or so, is I took a course called Take the Cry Out of Crypto. And I actually thought it was a course on trading crypto and how to make money really quickly. And it was the complete opposite. It was about fundamentals. It was about self-custody and security. It was about avoiding getting hacked or scammed. So my onboarding was straight into self-custody, how to be secure, how to think about it, and how to value what self-custody really is. And I'm completely with you. I think get off zero is the main message, and not to overwhelm a brand new person in the space with, now you need this wallet, now you need to do this. But what I've come to realize is I've taken that for granted so much that there's people in the space that have been in Bitcoin 2017, 2018 that still have all their Bitcoin on an exchange. And to me, that is absolutely mind blowing. So I do think it's a natural progression of the journey, like you said, but I do think it's so, so important, especially with the uncertainty in the economy right now. Is this one thing you can hold and truly own and no one can take it off you? Why risk having it on an exchange or having it somewhere that you could lose it?
Right. I fully agree with you. I think as I'm thinking about this now live, is like the order of operations maybe for someone new is why, what, how. Why being, what's the problems going on? Why does Bitcoin even matter? Like, is this even necessary in my life, right? Once you figure that out of like, okay, there's a lot of problems going on. I need to find some sort of instrument to store my value properly, right? Then's the what, okay? Well, what's the option? Bitcoin. What exactly is Bitcoin? How does it work? All that stuff. And then comes the how of, okay, what's the best way to actually do that? How do I actually store my Bitcoin? That's when you run through the lists of starting off in the exchange or going straight to self-custody or all of that, right? I think for me is like buying on an exchange and then sending that money to self-custody. But I think for new people getting into it, user experience and onboarding is so important to get right. Because just like your scenario, Finn, where like it sounded too complex, so immediately it was like tough, right? It turned you off. And so I think that's a very real problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about simplicity. And for anyone listening that might be thinking, wow, this sounds a bit confusing, it is simple. It's just new to you. So don't let any of this stop you. If anything, make it get you off zero and just learn on the go, because it's simple. It's as simple than using a bank account. So just roll your sleeves up and dive into that. So we talked a bit about your journey right at the start. I want to get now into what you're currently doing in the space. So do you want to give us first a bit of an introduction into what you're doing in the space and what you're currently building?
Yeah. I'll try and describe it to an audience who's kind of newer to the Bitcoin treasury space. So there is now a set of public companies that have bought Bitcoin and put it on their balance sheets, right? So traditionally, when an investor is valuing a normal company like Nvidia or Apple or something like that, there's very traditional metrics that you look at. You look at their revenue, their profit, what's their PE ratio, things like that. And you can go to any trading platform and find all that data, right? Whether it's Yahoo Finance or Bloomberg or whatever, Robinhood even. Now, how do you value these Bitcoin companies? Not in the same way. You don't look at their revenue, you don't look at their income statements, basically. They're usually valued based on their balance sheet and all sorts of other metrics that now people on Twitter in their own silos have come up with, right? Things like MNAV, Bitcoin yield, days to cover, things like that. And so I was like, okay, what if we can create a central source of truth database to track all of these companies and all of the relevant metrics that matter for investors? So volume, volatility, options market data, balance sheet data, debt, cash, etc. And that's kind of what I've been working on with Bitcoin Quant, automating that as much as possible. So that's kind of been the first focus of it. Now there's other opportunities as well that we can expand for Bitcoin Quant. Just today, we published our model that we built in collaboration with the Bitcoin Policy Institute to basically show the impact of legislation in America where the government would allow citizens to submit taxes through Bitcoin instead of in cash, and use that Bitcoin to fund a strategic reserve for the country. So we built that on Bitcoin Quant's platform, for example. So starting to expand out a little bit, but it's been a fun journey.
Awesome. We're going to carry on, but I'm just going to cut you off for anyone that's listening. If you just listen to Rohan, the US can now or will soon be able to pay their taxes in Bitcoin. And the reason that the US are doing this is to build their Bitcoin strategic reserve. So for those of you that still have things holding you back potentially around it's drug money or it's a scam or it's a pyramid scheme, just re-listen to what I've just said and Rohan's just said for the last minute of this episode. Do you have anything to add to that quickly?
Well, it's just the way of thinking that this is where the world is going. Like companies are buying Bitcoin, funds are buying Bitcoin, sovereign wealth funds, pensions, governments, El Salvador, America. And so they all see the idea of a store of value, at least that side of Bitcoin. And so I think we're beyond the days where it's just easily dismissed as, oh, it's a Ponzi, oh, it's for criminals. Like it's become legitimized ever since BlackRock created the ETF for it. And so it's a different game now. So it's worth studying up.
Absolutely. And apologies to cut you off. I just wanted to kind of bring that to the attention of the audience for anyone listening that still disregards things because of that. But if you'd like to continue and maybe a tiny bit more on the technical side and the journey, and then I'd love to ask you a bit more about the entrepreneurial side of things as well.
Yeah. So it's been interesting. I don't have a development background, actually. I studied finance at the University of Illinois. I had a minor in technology management, but it was more soft skill stuff for coding. And then I was a strategy consultant for 2 years at Bain, right? So I was mostly in Excel and PowerPoint. And then I come out with this platform, and I basically taught myself how to code using a lot of AI. And it's just magical what AI can enable you to achieve if you set your mind to it. I've come to realize that basically in this generation or in this era, there's three tools that matter a lot, right? AI for making money, Bitcoin for saving that money, and Twitter as a tool to connect, build an audience, build community. And if you're not using the tools that are available to you, you'll fall behind to the people who are. I think that's what I've come to learn. And so I've tried to take advantage of these three as much as possible in the last few years, but the AI piece in particular this year when it comes to coding.
Yeah, I had Bisha from Stormrake, Australian brokerage, on the other week, and he said the same thing. Like the opportunities for our generation and for everyone are endless that AI opens up. You can learn anything fairly deeply from AI and apply it to your area of expertise and really conquer that income piece of that. So I want to keep this relevant to Gen Z, but also to what you are building. So do you want to kind of wind us back to the beginning of that journey of ideation to implementation and then bringing product to the world so that people doesn't have to be in the Bitcoin space, but people that are trying to think of how can I get ahead? How can I escape the matrix, if you want to call it that, start applying my ideas to actually make an impact rather than them just staying as ideas?
100%. So basically my journey was while I was at Bain, I knew I kind of wanted to help add some value to the Bitcoin space. I thought rather than just recruit directly, I want to first add some free value and see if that takes me anywhere in terms of opportunities, right? So the first thing I did is I actually met up with a friend who showed me an AI coding tool. And he was like, dude, like you could do what you set your mind to and check out this thing. And I thought it was really cool. And so I actually just started playing around. Maybe I'll share screen. I wonder if this site still exists. Bitcoinscoreboard.com. Is it cool if I share screen?
Sure, man.
This was the first thing that I started to build, actually. And it's basically a fun little tool that shows you what price Bitcoin will need to hit in order to overtake a lot of the world's top assets. It seems this is all still up to date. So at its current price, or Bitcoin will need to hit $220,000 to overtake the market cap of NVIDIA. So I created this fun tool that shows like the progress bars, and then a little regret calculator that shows, okay, if you had bought $1,000 of Bitcoin when Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, called it a fraud, today you would have $20,000. So anyways, this was a fun little tool that I made, having no coding experience really. And I put it out on Twitter. It didn't get a ton of traction. I didn't have an audience. And I actually cold DM'd the website to like 20 different people who were posting about Bitcoin versus gold as an asset class. I was like, hey, I saw your tweet about Bitcoin versus gold. I actually made this tracker for it. Whatever, I shot my shot, sent it to 20 people. 3 responded, said, cool thing, dude. 1 responded and said, whoa, this is actually pretty neat. Why don't we hop on a call? I was like, okay. He's like, cool thing you built. But I have this other idea of something I've wanted to build that has a lot more enterprise value. We could maybe use your skills and kind of build it together. And so me and my business partner, Brandon, went in 50-50 on building Bitcoin Quant, and basically took those skills and built something different. So that just kind of proved to me that like I had an idea, I didn't have an audience. It was very scary to try something new, but I was like relentless about sending it out. Even though I didn't have a ton of people in my inbox, I was like, let me just push it out, take some action. And then one thing led to another. And now flash forward to today, the Bitcoin Quant has led to all kinds of different opportunities and has given me a lot more optionality in life, which is really cool. So it's been an exciting journey, but it's proof that like if you have an idea, nowadays you don't need as much technical background, like you can bring it to life.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions coming up from this. Number 1 is, on this journey to where you are today, what or have there been any mental blocks that have come up where you've had these thoughts of, or am I right to be doing this? Am I the right person? Am I qualified enough? I'll ask the second one later. You might not have, but have you had any of these blocks?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've been newer to coding relatively. I actually haven't really made this public yet. I haven't told that many people that a lot of this site is built like using AI, but it's worked and it's accurate data. And so there should be no reason why that's seen as something like it's tier 2 coding, right? I've put in all the checks and balances, but I think early on in the journey, yeah, there was tons of things that took me a long time to figure out. And I know it would take people who have studied computer science for years or something, it would take them much quicker, right? And I made mistakes along the way that over time, I kind of, as I started to make more things work, it built up more confidence in me. And so it became a self-reinforcing loop. Whereas I could do more things, I could think that I could do even more things, right? And so it's like day by day, brick by brick. At the start, it was one new feature a day was the goal and the mantra. One new feature a day, that's it. And I would tweet it every single day. And then like you look back and it's like, huh, you can like, I did that. Kind of cool. And then that gave me the confidence to kind of keep going and build new things. So yeah, there was definitely those times.
Yeah, compounding consistency, the power of that, and it's awesome that you're literally building it in public as well. So, like you said, you can look back on it when maybe you're going through a bit of a wobble and be like, "Oh, I've come a long way. This is awesome." So, secondary to that, you've said it's opened up loads of doors. Your life's improved drastically since taking action and putting yourself out there. Where do you envision, or what goals have you got for the future now that you've taken action, put yourself out there, and what does that all look like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I knew I wanted to be working in the Bitcoin space. So it was a lifestyle choice of I didn't love my job as much. It paid the bills very nicely, but I was like, I want to do something that I care about, advance a mission that I care about, which is helping Bitcoin adoption. And one way to do that was through corporate adoption. That was an area that I felt like I had a niche skill set to be able to help out in. And so I did that. In terms of goals for the future, it's to continue to find gaps in the market and solve those and add transparency. I've now built up this capability of being able to use my new coding skills to add visualizations and add transparency and add data in places that didn't exist before. So it's because of Bitcoin Quant that I was approached by the Bitcoin Policy Institute, for example, where they said, hey, we've seen your stuff. Would you be able to help us build this thing? And I was like, yeah, yeah. And I hadn't built something like that before, but because I had the confidence from being able to do things that I didn't think was possible at the time, I could now say yes with more confidence, because it's like, okay, I haven't built this model, but I believe I can figure it out. And then it compounds over time, right? And just today itself, from this model being made public, now other opportunities have started to come. And so I'm just trying to put myself out there, use Twitter to highlight and build in public, use AI to help me actually develop, and then store that excess value in Bitcoin for the long run.
It's awesome, man. It's so good to see, and the consistency as well, the proof of work, as Bitcoiners would say. Watching you from afar, even though a lot of the stuff you're doing goes straight over my head. So it's awesome to see, and a great message for any Gen Z that are watching this, that you really can take an idea, and as long as you apply it with consistency, leverage AI, leverage social media, and your life can change pretty quickly and open up doors that you never thought were possible. And then store that possibility that's coming your way in Bitcoin, and it will get even better as well. What I will do is put all of your social media anywhere for people to find you in the description. But for anyone listening, where can they find you, reach out to you, ask you questions?
Yeah, 100%. On Twitter at Rohan Hirani _ is the main place that I try and put stuff out there, and I keep my DMs open for anyone. I would say that's the main thing. And then you could check out the website at bitcoinquant.co.
Awesome. I'll put that in the description for anyone. I'd highly recommend checking it out. And Rohan, before we close out, I want to pass the mic over to you, bringing it back to Gen Z specifically. We're meeting next month at Bitcoin MENA. Really looking forward to that and taking the stage with you. But what message do you have for Gen Z that are listening to this and starting to dabble, or maybe they're already in Bitcoin and looking to keep moving forwards?
What I have found for everyone in Gen Z who starts to approach me asking about this stuff is they say, what are your thoughts on crypto, right? What's the best crypto? It's always the word crypto. And I fundamentally think that people who are in Bitcoin long enough know that Bitcoin and crypto are two different worlds. And I'll give you one reason why. Bitcoin is the only crypto that doesn't have a foundation. There's no marketing department. There's no CEO of Bitcoin. There's no pre-mine event. It's just an open source protocol that was given as a gift to the world. That in itself makes it so that no other crypto can be the same structure as Bitcoin, right? So treat them as two different worlds. Not saying that there's no valuable use cases in other cryptos. Maybe there are, but just understand that it's not all the same bucket. You should treat Bitcoin versus other cryptos differently. There's a lot of scams and collapses that have happened in crypto over the years, and so that gives a bad rep to the entire ecosystem, right? But there's been no bad things with the Bitcoin protocol itself. It's done what it's always said it would do, and it just keeps on working. And so that's my main message, that the first thing is to separate the two, and it'll make the journey into education a lot more clear.
Awesome. It's a great way to end it out. Rohan, thanks so much for jumping on, man. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person next month. And guys, anyone that's listening that enjoyed this, obviously check Rohan out, but feel free to message either of us or put in the comments any questions, because we're both going to be speaking next month on a Gen Z panel. So these questions are going to help us with topics and to make it as valuable as possible. So make sure to give any feedback from this, but also any questions that you'd like answering. Rohan, thanks again for jumping on, man. Looking forward to meeting you next month. And guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Finn.